Tonight, a growing health warning across the United States. Ticks are appearing earlier, turning up in places where many people did not expect to find them, and sending more Americans to emergency rooms. In April, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said weekly emergency department visits for tick bites were higher than normal in most regions of the country. In every region except the south-central United States, the rate was the highest recorded for that point in the year since federal tracking began in 2017. By July, the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health said some parts of the country were seeing tick bite visits at a 10-year high. The increase has produced two very different reactions. Public health officials are warning about expanding tick ranges, longer periods of activity, invasive species and diseases that are still poorly recognized. Online, however, millions of people are asking a far more alarming question. Are these ticks natural? Some viral posts claim ticks are being genetically modified and released to make Americans allergic to meat. Others allege that boxes of ticks are being dumped on farms, that pharmaceutical companies are creating demand for vaccines, or that today's tick problem is connected to Cold War biological weapons research. Tonight, we are separating what is documented from what remains speculation. And the first fact is important. There is evidence that tick exposure is unusually high in parts of America this year. But there is no single national tick census counting every tick in every state. Emergency room data measure people seeking medical care after bites. Surveillance maps show where tick species have been collected and reported. Neither one, by itself, proves that every state has more ticks than at any point in history. CDC also warns that a county with no tick records may simply have limited sampling or reporting. And when a county is listed as established, that classification remains on the map permanently, even if the local population later changes. Still, the broader pattern is difficult to dismiss. The blacklegged tick, commonly called the deer tick, is widely established across the eastern United States. Adult blacklegged ticks can become active whenever winter temperatures rise above freezing. The Lone Star tick, once associated mainly with the South, is now widely distributed across the South, Midwest, and Northeast. It is aggressive, it readily bites people, and the adult female can be recognized by the white spot, or Lone Star, on its back. There is also an invasive species now established across parts of the eastern half of the country, the Asian longhorned tick. This tick was first detected outside a United States port inspection site in New Jersey in 2017. It can reproduce without mating. A single female can effectively produce the next generation by herself, allowing a population to build rapidly after only one tick reaches a suitable area. Large infestations can create a serious threat to cattle and other livestock. The species has now been collected from New York south to Georgia and west toward Missouri. But this is where precise language matters. These are not new variants in the way people speak about variants of a virus. They are different tick species, expanding populations, and newly recognized disease risks. And one of the most concerning discoveries is that health conditions once connected mainly to one species may not always remain limited to that species. That brings us to alpha-gal syndrome. Alpha-gal syndrome is not an infection. It is not a virus living inside the body. And it is not a new form of Lyme disease. It is an allergy. Alpha-gal is a sugar molecule found in most mammals, including cows, pigs, sheep, deer, and rabbits. Humans do not naturally produce it. After certain tick bites, a person's immune system can become sensitized to that molecule. The next time that person eats mammalian meat, consumes some dairy products, or encounters certain mammal-derived ingredients, the immune system may react as though it is facing a dangerous threat. The result can be hives, severe stomach pain, vomiting, diarrhea, swelling, difficulty breathing, a dangerous drop in blood pressure, or full anaphylaxis. What makes alpha-gal especially confusing is the delay. Most familiar food allergy reactions begin shortly after a person eats. Alpha-gal reactions commonly begin between 2 and 6 hours after exposure. Someone can eat a hamburger at dinner, go to bed feeling normal, and wake during the night with hives, abdominal pain, swelling, or trouble breathing. That delay can make the food seem unrelated and can leave patients searching for an explanation for months or even years. The condition itself may not appear until weeks or months after the tick bite that triggered it. In the United States, alpha-gal syndrome has been associated most strongly with the Lone Star tick. More than 110,000 suspected cases were identified between 2010 and 2022. But the condition is not nationally reportable, meaning there is no complete federal count. The CDC estimates that as many as 450,000 Americans may be affected. There is no vaccine that prevents alpha-gal syndrome and no established cure that immediately switches the allergy off. Management usually means avoiding mammalian meat such as beef, pork, lamb, venison, and rabbit. Some patients also react to dairy, gelatin, mammalian fat, or ingredients used in certain medicines. People at risk of a severe reaction may be prescribed emergency epinephrine. For some patients, sensitivity may decline over time, particularly if they avoid additional tick bites. But that is not guaranteed, and another tick bite may reactivate the allergic reactions. The science is also still developing. The Lone Star tick remains the primary American species associated with alpha-gal. But researchers have reported a confirmed case following a blacklegged tick bite in Maine. Another case in Washington raised concern that Western blacklegged ticks may also be capable of triggering the allergy. Those reports do not prove that every tick species can cause alpha-gal syndrome. They do show why scientists are now looking beyond the original map. That uncertainty is one reason the condition can feel new, even though the connection between tick bites and delayed meat allergy has been documented for years. And alpha-gal is only one part of the changing threat. Blacklegged ticks can carry the bacteria that cause Lyme disease. The CDC estimates that approximately 476,000 people are diagnosed and treated for Lyme disease in the United States each year. The same species can also carry organisms associated with babesiosis, anaplasmosis, and Powassan virus. Powassan remains uncommon, but reported cases have been increasing. It can cause inflammation of the brain or the membranes surrounding the brain and spinal cord. There is currently no vaccine to prevent it and no medication that specifically eliminates the virus. The Asian longhorned tick creates another kind of concern. Federal agriculture officials say it can form extremely large infestations and transmit a cattle pathogen known as Thylaria orientalis icada. However, available laboratory evidence indicates that this invasive tick is not an effective carrier of the bacteria that cause Lyme disease or human granulocytic anaplasmosis. That distinction matters because online posts often combine every tick species, every disease, and every research project into one frightening story. So why are Americans encountering so many ticks? There is no single explanation. White-tailed deer are crucial hosts for adult Lone Star ticks and blacklegged ticks. Deer populations and ranges recovered dramatically during the 20th century following conservation programs, forest regrowth, and relocation efforts. As deer returned, ticks regained access to large, mobile hosts that could carry them through suitable environments. CDC specifically connects the restored range of the Lone Star tick with the expansion of white-tailed deer populations. At the same time, many Americans now live where lawns, subdivisions, and recreational trails meet wooded habitat. These fragmented edges can bring people, deer, rodents, and ticks into the same small spaces. A person does not need to be deep inside a remote wilderness. The CDC says many Lyme disease exposures happen in yards and neighborhoods. Temperature and moisture also influence the risk. Ticks depend on environmental conditions to survive, develop, and locate hosts. Warmer conditions can lengthen the period during which ticks are active and increase the amount of suitable habitat in northern areas. Adult blacklegged ticks may even begin searching for hosts during warm periods in winter. But climate is not the only factor. Land use, deer and rodent populations, vegetation, rainfall, humidity, human outdoor activity, improved testing, and more extensive surveillance can all influence the numbers that appear in official reports. And that complexity creates fertile ground for conspiracy theories. The first major claim is that genetically modified ticks were created to make people allergic to red meat, either to force a dietary change or to reduce meat consumption. Some versions directly accuse billionaire Bill Gates or international environmental organizations. There is no evidence that the Lone Star ticks associated with alpha-gal syndrome were genetically engineered for that purpose. The theory appears to combine two separate facts. One is the very real rise in awareness of alpha-gal syndrome. The other is research involving a different cattle tick species designed to reduce that agricultural pest's ability to reproduce and spread disease among livestock. Viral posts connected that research to human meat allergy. But the species being studied was not the Lone Star tick responsible for most American alpha-gal cases. And the research goal was to suppress an agricultural pest, not to create a tick that makes humans allergic to meat. The fact that researchers study tick genetics does not establish that altered ticks were released to create a human allergy. The second claim is that farmers are finding boxes filled with ticks deliberately placed on their land. Videos repeating this allegation have attracted millions of views. Some versions blame vaccine manufacturers and argue that a manufactured tick crisis would increase demand for a future Lyme disease vaccine. But viral repetition is not physical evidence. The posts have not provided independently verified locations, laboratory identification of the ticks, a documented chain of custody, or evidence tying any container to a government agency or pharmaceutical company. A container of ticks, even if one were independently verified, would still require basic questions. Who collected it? Where was it found? What species were inside? Was the location documented by anyone other than the original uploader? And was there evidence that somebody deliberately placed it there? Without those answers, the allegation remains an internet claim, not a demonstrated event. The third theory is older and more complicated. It alleges that Lyme disease spread from military experiments involving weaponized ticks. Online discussions frequently connect the theory to Plum Island, a federal animal disease research facility located near Long Island. There is a real historical question underneath that theory. The United States operated Cold War biological warfare programs, and in 2026, Congress directed the Government Accountability Office to review federal records from 1945 through 1972 and determine whether ticks were used as hosts or delivery mechanisms for biological warfare agents. As of June 2026, the GAO review was still underway. That means two things can be true at the same time. It is legitimate to examine government archives and determine exactly what experiments occurred. But the existence of an investigation is not proof that Lyme disease was created in a laboratory or that infected ticks were released into the American population. Researchers have found evidence of the Lyme bacterium in museum specimens collected before the Plum Island facility became active under the Army Chemical Corps. Infected mice collected on Cape Cod in 1894 and infected ticks collected on Long Island in 1945 show that the bacterium was already circulating in northeastern wildlife before the period at the center of the theory. Scientists have also said the genetic evidence does not support one recent point source from which all North American Lyme bacteria suddenly spread. The government review may uncover historical information that deserves public attention. Until the review is completed, however, it cannot honestly be cited as confirmation of a modern tick release operation. The strongest evidence available today points toward ecological expansion, not a coordinated release. Ticks have animal hosts to carry them. They have recovering forests and suburban edges in which to survive. They have longer periods of suitable weather in many regions. Some invasive species can reproduce with extraordinary efficiency. And people increasingly live, work, and spend recreational time in the exact landscapes where ticks are waiting. There is, however, a genuine information gap that helps suspicion grow. America does not have a complete, real-time count of its tick population. Alpha-gal syndrome is not nationally reportable. Tick surveillance varies from county to county. A lack of records can mean a tick is absent, but it can also mean nobody has sampled that location thoroughly. And in a CDC survey of 1,500 healthcare providers, 42% said they had never heard of alpha-gal syndrome. Among those who had heard of it, fewer than one-third knew how to diagnose it. In other words, people are experiencing a visible problem while the official picture remains incomplete. That does not prove a cover-up. It does show why better surveillance, faster diagnosis, and clearer public communication are urgently needed. For families, the practical advice remains straightforward. Use an EPA-registered repellent when entering grassy, brushy, or wooded areas. Clothing and gear treated with 0.5% permethrin can provide additional protection. Check the body, clothing, children, and pets after spending time outdoors. Shower soon after coming inside. And remove attached ticks promptly with fine-tipped tweezers rather than waiting for a medical appointment. Anyone who develops fever, rash, severe headache, facial weakness, unusual fatigue, or other illness after a tick bite should contact a healthcare professional. Anyone experiencing difficulty breathing, throat or tongue swelling, faintness, or other signs of a severe allergic reaction should seek emergency care immediately. And for people who repeatedly experience delayed reactions several hours after eating beef, pork, lamb, venison, dairy, or gelatin, alpha-gal syndrome is a possibility worth discussing with a qualified healthcare provider. The rise in American tick encounters is real. The expansion of certain species is real. Alpha-gal syndrome is real, potentially life-threatening, and still widely under-recognized. What has not been established is that genetically modified ticks are being released to control diets, sell vaccines, or deliberately make Americans sick. The real story may be less cinematic than a secret laboratory, but it is not less serious. A changing environment, expanding wildlife populations, invasive species, and gaps in public health surveillance have created conditions in which a tiny parasite can reach more people, carry more recognized threats, and generate enormous fear. And this summer, the warning from health officials is clear. The tick problem is no longer limited to a distant forest or an occasional camping trip. For millions of Americans, it may now begin at the edge of the backyard.